Good morning and welcome to the first of 3 NHF events that are going to explore how the Together with Tenants Charter has been delivered across the West Midlands. Today we'll be focusing on 2 themes, relationships and communications, and I'm delighted to be joined by professional and tenant colleagues from Bolton Court with Sarah and Wellington, and Rachel and Mark from Trent and Dove Housing Associations. Unfortunately, we've had 1 or 2 technical issues this morning, and Wellington's camera unfortunately isn't working properly, so we may not get to see him on video, but he's definitely here in spirit and voice. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. So for those that are new to the Go webinar conference system, there are a few things to look for on the dashboard. The red arrow will open and close that dashboard, and you'll see there space to put in your comments and any questions. And Kate Warburton from the NHF will be facilitating a short Q&A session after each presentation. We're also going to be sending a link of the recording of this webinar and the slide decks after the event. But I think just to kick us off, I think it's worth just reminding ourselves that housing organisations have a very unique relationship with its residents and tenants, and sometimes that can span decades. Unlike others, Wrekin are on a journey to make sure that those relationships remain resilient and inclusive, and that the customer voice very genuinely influences decisions about their services, their homes and their communities. And so we as a sector have a number of challenges ahead, don't we? There's the white paper, a new code of governance, and a revitalised discussion, quite rightly, about equalities and diversity and creating parity of opportunity. And that's all set in a backdrop that's been dominated by the impact of COVID. So for us as a sector, as residents, as tenants and professionals, there's lots for us to think about. And I'm now going to hand over to Rachel and Mark, who are going to talk to us and share their experiences from Trent and Dove. Rachel, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Good morning, everybody. I'm Rachel Chudley. I'm the Housing Director at Trent and Dove Housing, and I'm here with Mark Ashby this morning. Mark's a board member. Mark's the chair of our operations committee, and he's a tenant. So I'll be handing over to him in a moment. But I was going to explain just a little bit about Trent and Dove first. Trent and Dove is based in geographic between the East and West Midlands, and whilst we do have properties in South Derbyshire and North West Leicestershire, most of our properties are in East Staffordshire. We've got 6,500 of them, and we were formed in 2001 when the stock transferred from the local authority. Most of our properties are in Burton-on-Trent and Uttoxeter, which is a market town, and there's a long history of brewing traditions in both of those towns. Although we do have some properties in local villages, as I say, most of our properties are in those towns. Trivia for you, we actually have the biggest brewing factory in Europe within touching distance of our building, and because we've got brewing, we've also got Marmite. So that just gives you a bit of a flavour for the uniqueness, perhaps, of where we are. So, if could we have the next slide, please? A little bit about our history. We think that in the housing sector, the way that Trent and Dove has been working with our tenants over time has been fashionable, and then unfashionable, and then fashionable again, a bit like these shoes. Because we've actually had our tenants embedded in everything that we do for a really long time. So we've got board members, say Mark's here today, but we've also got an all customer operations committee. We have an independent scrutiny panel. We have a federation of residents associations. We have customer advocates who support complainants. We've got a volunteer team who are out on our estates every day. Got community cafes, we've got community projects, so we've got all sorts of things that potentially that people would perhaps expect. But if you think that that means that what I'm going to be talking about, what we're going to be talking about here means that we're getting everything right and that we haven't learned anything from Together with Tenants, then you'd be wrong, because actually Together with Tenants has been a great exercise for us, and we've worked through it, and actually we've got some really good concrete things to learn and to move ourselves on. So if I hand over to Mark, Mark can explain some of that journey. So next slide, please, and over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, I'm Mark Ashby. I've been a board member for 7 years. I'm also a tenant and I'm the chair of the operations committee. I was part of the national feedback process and went to some of the workshops with the Minister of Housing when they were working on the Green Paper. And I'd like to share my thoughts on our Together with Tenants journey. Our Together with Tenants journey has been interesting with ups and downs, using the 3 principles that sit under the relationships. Next slide, please. We do so many good things at Tenants, and during the review, we heard about all those good things from our customers. From the support people have when they can't pay their rent, to a dedicated mental health worker, to supporting community projects. But frankly, as tenants, we've said that the website needs to be a lot better. It's our shop window and it's not yet good enough. So there's a plan to overhaul it in 21-22. And as tenants, we're going to drive what we want to see and where we want to see it. Another thing that we've said is that we have to remember that other agencies are part to play in our communities, and that there are Trent of customers who might not want to have a lot to do with us, but are very keen and committed to making their communities work. So the operations committee, we're very keen to get a clear view of what's happening in each of our communities and task Trent and Dove with mapping the community areas around us. And this was such a huge task that we needed a budget, so that we got approval from the board, and Trent and Dove managed to do one part of our area, and that was done this year. Mapping exercise highlights other players in our communities, from charities to cultural centres to community projects to faith centres like churches, mosques and synagogues. And we need to work proactively with these to create openness and communication and networking to reach the harder to reach tenants. Next slide, please. On the upside, we revised our customer promise in line with the Together with Tenants principles, and we engaged the different groups of tenants to make sure that we got this right. But Together with Tenants has prompted us to close the loop, to demand another level of accountability. There was always a promise, but we realised that tenants were not told whether or not we were delivering on all parts of it. We weren't closing the loop. So now we're about to do our first promise update, where we publish our successes and our needs to do better to increase transparency. Next slide, please. Hearing what Trent and Dove got wrong and acknowledging that is a big part of building trust, which is what all good relationships are about. In our review of what's gone well and not well, we pointed out 2 more big things. Our engagement options aren't visible enough. We have all these good arrangements, but for many of our tenants, they probably don't even know about them. We also thought that our tenant engagement may be too dependent on active participation on our associations, panels and committees. We particularly want to up our game with customer groups that are harder to reach, hence the community mapping project. One challenge we had is when the committee were asked our opinion on applying the rent increase formula. And as everybody here knows, we had to think about that during a really difficult time with lockdown. We were very challenging with officers and wanted to make sure that there was a big communication campaign for customers who may have needed financial support as a result of COVID as well as Brexit. We sought these assurances about vulnerable groups and we got it. And we also placed clear signposting on our website for people who've worked all their lives who have never claimed and who might not know what they're entitled to claim for. So we can signpost them to take a bit of the stress away from them. So on that note, I'm going to hand you back to Rachel.
Thanks, Mark. So I'd like to summarise what we've done and we've learned. We've got a great history of working with our tenants. In the main, we have great relationships with many of them, and that's been built up over a long, long period of time and of a commitment. But for us, Together with Tenants has actually come at a really good time because it's enabled us to refresh that relationship, extend it, and it's enabling us to build new relationships with different partners and with different customers to make sure that we maintain and we improve that all the time. Because if you don't refresh relationships, they can get stale and a bit stuck in the past. And I think what we'd worked out actually through this process is that had happened a little bit to us. So by working with our tenants, it's been a fantastic opportunity for us to build on the great things we've done in the past, but to identify and be really honest about the things that we can do even better. So if we could just look at the next slide, we can actually talk again and just pick up the point that Jan was making about the unique position of our relationship. In this sector, we actually can have a relationship with somebody that can be truly cradle to grave. And sometimes it's possible for somebody, if they're wanting to live in one of our communities, that actually it may be difficult for them to actually rent a property from somebody, from a landlord that isn't Trent and Dove. And of course, if we aren't careful, not just for us, but actually in the sector in general, that could lead to a lack of competition, which might even give us potentially poorer service. But the way that we look at it is it's a privilege for us to be in a position of such high accountability and expectation, and we take that relationship incredibly seriously, which is why we're wanting to be completely open here about the learning that we've taken from Together with Tenants. And we're really excited about being able to build on the past, but actually go forward with our customers to a new and even exciting, better future. So I'm hoping that that journey and that openness has been helpful for other people to be hearing about. So thank you very much. We go on to the next slide and say we're very interested to know what people think about what it is that we've said and how that contrasts with other people's experiences.
So if there's any questions.
Hi everyone, so we've got a couple of questions. So the first one, are there any plans to work with other associations to develop generic systems to meet common needs, as there might be other associations that are doing similar things?
Shall I pick that up, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have relationships with other associations in our area, but because I think of our history, we tend to say we're probably the biggest landlord in our particular area. But absolutely, we have a intention of both working within our area with other landlords. But one of the things that actually, again, we've enjoyed so far and planning to pick up even more through this process is to learn from some of the other associations who've actually been going through Together with Tenants. We're really excited and interested to see what Accord are doing, and very open to learning from some of the things that actually we've already seen this morning. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Another question. What is the mix of your tenants, and do you have any sort of shared ownership leaseholds, and what differences have you implemented to kind of accommodate and communicate with them?
Again, shall I pick that up?
Yeah, I'll let you.
Yeah, we've got a whole range of demography. Yes, we absolutely have got shared owners and leaseholders. We've got about 200 shared owners, and again, that's an area that, although we have involved them, that's another area for us to actually get a little bit better at actually working a bit more directly with our shared owners and leaseholders. So that's another area that we've actually identified in our review of something that we want to get. That's definitely on our do even better. But we've got a whole range of diversity, both in terms of background, but also in terms of age. We've got mainly general needs, but actually we've got sheltered schemes and extra care, and we've been working with all of those tenants during this review.
Thank you. A question for Mark. How does your committee interact with the board, and do you attend board?
Yes, the committee feeds directly into the board, and we have the scrutiny panel, which we are independent to the committee, and they do deep dives on various things, highlight problems to us, and then we feed any feedback from the general community, wider community, goes up to board. But we also hold the board to account on a number of areas, particularly customer-facing services. So we looked into the repairs issue, and we overhauled that recently. and brought the repairs in-house, which improved the satisfaction ratings massively. And also we made a saving whilst doing that. We changed the relet standards and the void standards, and increased them, although they were above the NHF's guidelines, the regulatory guidelines, I should say. We were above that. We've increased it even higher.
Great, thank you. How do you communicate with tenants who are not online, and have you worked to increase and improve digital skills amongst tenants?
This is the thing where we are struggling, and I think a lot of housing associations are struggling. We do try and reach out. We do postal surveys, and we also, get the information that way, but we're still not reaching everybody. And that's why we're trying to create this community mapping so that we can liaise better, whether it's through a church or a mosque, or whether it's a charity or community project that we don't help support. By getting involved with that and letting them know and supporting them, we can get that feedback coming up through them, and increase our networking skills with our tenants. Do you want to add anything to that, Rachel?
Yeah, I would, please, if that's okay. No, you're absolutely right, Mark, and it's one of the things that we see ourselves doing, don't we, over the next few months. But what we did do, again, obviously during COVID, was we reached out and actually made direct contact with 2,500 of our tenants, not online, but actually directly by making sure that they weren't isolated. And that was such a positive experience for us and for our customers, many of whom were really, really touched that we'd gone out and done that our operations committee decided that actually they really wanted us to extend that. And we're just beginning a befriending initiative that, again, not only will keep that going, but actually is going to extend and form that network in our area with other voluntary and charitable organisations that, again, we started working much more closely with during the lockdown. So we're doing all those things.
If I can add onto that as well, we because of the way we communicated the COVID pandemic, communication is key to everything, and we dealt with that beautifully with our staff and with our tenants at such a high level. And so we've taken this model and we're going to try and replicate that with everything that we do, because the surveys that came back were sky high, 97, 95, 97% from satisfaction from our customers at how we handled the COVID pandemic. And that was all about communication. And so this is where all housing associations have to up their game, because communication is key. It overwrites everything. That two-way flow of information has to come.
Thank you. So a couple more. Have you found the number of involved residents has increased as a result of the work that you've done?
Well, it's something. Oh, sorry. Yeah. We actually go through an exercise twice a year where we actually do an open event and ask people who are interested in wanting to become even more involved with us to actually come and have a discussion with us about it. Give them a whole range of options. So every year we extend and adjust our arrangements and make sure that people get a chance to choose how and where they'd like to be involved with us. But actually, one of the things that we are also wanting to make sure is, if you from what we were talking about earlier, is to make sure that people don't only have to be engaged with us in that slightly more traditional way. We also want to make sure that we are reaching out and giving people other options. So yes, we say we're very keen to continue with allowing people to have a complete range of options to be involved with us in the normal ways, but we do want to extend that, and that's one of the things I think that operations committee and officers have already identified as a potential growth area for us.
Thank you. Could you give us an example of where tenants have participated in kind of getting involved with a really important decision that affects the whole housing association?
Go on, Mark.
There's
There are quite a few,
been
aren't
a
there?
number. I mean, the in-house repairs, bringing repairs in-house, was solely down to the operations committee questioning this, asking the exec team to go away and look at it for the feasibility, and of course bringing it back, and then we put the recommendation up to board, who approved it. You know, and that was a big contract. You know, and it worked because the standards that the in-house repairs surveys, which were, I think they were 80, low 80s or something, then went up to 90s. So.
Can I give you another example? We've got there, so we've got quite a few. But recently, the tenant scrutiny panel that reports straight into the operations panel did an exercise on finding out how well does our customer service team actually answer and provide a service to our customers, and they were concerned about the age of the telephony system, because actually that was something that when they undertook that, they could see that was an area of weakness for us. And whilst we had plans to replace that, because of the very strong recommendation coming from that, we actually altered priorities and did that earlier. So that's another direct kind of impact, which I say has affected all of the association. And bringing that decision forward because of its importance.
Another one was the IT infrastructure for Tenants and Duff, which we helped push. It needed updating, but also our webpage, which is what we're doing now, is we're tasking members of the scrutiny panel and members of the operations committee who want to be on that panel to look at the website and help to change and shape the whole of the website to make it user friendly, because we have all this information but it's disjointed. So we need the tenants to show us how they navigate, and then design the network around them, the website around them.
Yeah, I've got one last one. If we're still looking for another one, one of the things, again, if you remember, Mark, an operations committee was about 18 months ago. We went through a whole exercise of looking at the way that we gather in satisfaction information. And if you remember, one of the things that came out as a result of that was a decision by operations committee to wanting to, again, to modernise. We talked about options, very clear decision to go to actually going for independent telephone surveys. As you say, Mark, we still do some postal surveys when it's the right thing to do, but making that big shift to an independent telephone survey, which actually which got slightly delayed because of COVID, as many things have done. But actually we're in our second quarter of those results, aren't we, coming back to operations committee. So that was another big decision. But again, all of that then is flowing through to the rest of the organisation.
Okay, one final question. Just thinking about together with tenants and kind of through the lens of communication and relationships, what do you think is the most important thing tenants need from housing associations?
I think it's clear communication and knowing what services are there, expecting good service, expecting good, clear communication, and it should be, for me personally, it's a two-way flow of information, and this is where we need to improve. So, and I think every organisation is exactly in the same boat. That we have to improve the flow of communication. And as a tenant, I want to know what the organisation is doing. And as a committee member and board member, I know all of these things, but my neighbours haven't got a clue. You know, and so that's, I think, is the biggest thing.
And I think for me, I think obviously Mark's completely right, but I think that the other thing that that I think people really need is they need to be able to trust their landlord. Really important. Really important. And trust comes from so many things. It comes obviously from being able to know that what you're being told is the truth, and that there is an openness. So you're absolutely right, Mark. But I think it's about trust.
Communication.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If it's open and transparent, the communication, then trust will follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Rachel, Mark, can I just thank you, really? That was a really, really honest, transparent, open look and discussion about your experiences. That was really great to hear, and certainly some takeaways that I've made note of. Love the idea of the community mapping. That's really exciting. So I think we'd all love to hear more about how that works forward. I think you certainly reminded us of the need to keep those relationships refreshed, reinvigorated in terms of the approach that you've had to take. And I think the themes around trust and uniqueness absolutely shone through. And I think it can be easy to overlook those feelings of isolation and loneliness, particularly during COVID and the different periods of lockdown that some parts of our communities have all kind of been feeling. So it's a really timely reminder, really. And I know certainly at Wrekin we learned a lot from that first lockdown, and communication was again a key theme that we had through surveys with customers.
Can I just add to that?
Of course,
Sorry.
Mark.
The other thing is society has lost its cohesion. You know, the village has its village halls. They're no longer building community centres. So that cohesion's gone. So by networking with all of these different projects and getting the communities to want to help themselves and supporting them, more importantly, will help bring that cohesion back. And we've found that in Windsor with the Windsor CAF, you know. So this is what we're trying to replicate, but also by getting involved with other communities, and that way you'll get more information, and you know, our communities will feel safer, better, more connected.
Absolutely, and I think the feeling that kind of community spirit really has absolutely been a standout issue. I think during all of our experiences during the pandemic, regardless of kind of the sector you happen to live within, it's just really come through, hasn't it? Thank you very much, both of you, for sharing your experiences with us. I'm really delighted now to be able to hand over to Wellington, who I know is still with us, and Sarah, who are going to talk to us about their approach to the very important theme that's already emerged today around communication. So over to Sarah and Wellington from Accord. I hope.
Oh yes, can you hear me?
We can, Wellington. Hi, Sarah. Hi. I'll leave you to.
Thank you.
You can, thank you.
Right, could I have my presentation, please? Is that possible? Thank you. Right, I'm going to start, and like Mark and Rachel, really, I don't want you to think for 1 minute that Accord have got all the answers, or that we've got everything right. We're still on exactly that same journey that I guess many of you are. But just a bit of context about Accord for people that don't know. So we have about 13,000 homes across 20 plus local authorities, mainly inner city and urban. In addition to managing homes, we also design, construct and build them through our factory, and that's been a key part of communication with customers about design of homes and the things that people want for their future lives. But in addition to our general needs tenants, we also have a very diverse care and support offering. So about 100 different care and support schemes, with everything from mother and baby, young offenders, through to extra care, nursing care, end of life care, and some dementia centres of excellence. And clearly, with such a wide client base, we have to find very innovative ways to communicate with those customers, which has really again been a journey for us in terms of learning best and innovative methods to put in place. But our work isn't just about together with tenants. We also do much wider community work, and our strategy is not a customer engagement or a resident engagement strategy. It's a community engagement strategy, and we believe, and following on from what Mark has said, that those wider neighbourhood networks and projects are really important, so that our customers not only feel part of Accord and communicate very clearly with us in a two-way mechanism, but can also feel part of the communities in which they live, and are able to access services and projects that are perhaps outside of a normal landlord function. And then the last sort of bit of the story for Accord is that we're currently in advanced merger talks with an organisation called Green Square, and hopefully our merger will take place on the 1st of April. And part of those merger talks has been involving customers from both organisations in what they want to see as part of the new organisation. Work has started on shaping the customer engagement strategy so that it meets the requirements of all of our customers going forward, and there's plans for customers to review policies and really important things like KPIs going forward as part of a joint offering. If I could have the next slide, please, and I'll grab a drink while that's happening. So our communication commitment is not necessarily about the what, because we're conscious, because of our wide and diverse customer base, that we can't just provide the same information to everybody and expect it to be useful. So whilst clearly we will provide those top level statistics about how our organisation is performing, some of the issues Mark and Rachel have touched upon around repairs, around contact centre responses, around complaints, we really try to do a deep dive into what local customers want in terms of local groups. So it's more about the how we want to communicate with our customers rather than the what, because we will deal with that on a local level. And so our commitment, which is being drawn up by our customers, is around making information accessible, easy to understand, and in a way that is understandable and accessible to them. So, for example, because of our wide tenant base, we have to produce information in certain languages. We have to do it in very accessible ways for our care and support colleagues. And actually, it's not all about written communication. We've had to find methods to communicate much more widely than just the written form. Next slide, please. So in terms of communication and the sort of the wider context, really, I thought it was important to talk about some of the work that we have put in place to try and ensure we communicate with customers around a range of things. So, like many organisations, pre and post COVID, we have upped our game in terms of our digital offering, and it was interesting to hear the question around, you know, is it all digital now? And actually, no, it isn't all digital, although we do push out lots of information on social media through tweeting and on our website and through virtual platforms like this. But we are conscious that probably for about 20% of our customers, being online is not always their preferred choice. And where customers want to go online and can't, we have a Black Country Click Start project, which has enabled customers far away from a digital interface to enable them to get more confident online. But we have trialled a wide variety of communication tools to enable people to communicate with us, whatever their background. So just a few photographs on this slide. There is a photo of a lady that looks like she's wearing sort of scuba diving goggles, and actually that's a virtual reality headset. And we've used this communication method with customers who've got dementia because it's a stress-free way of them communicating with us to really bring about a sense of well-being. And we've found, using these virtual reality headsets, we've seen improvements in dementia patients and their ability to communicate and actually use verbal skills sometimes for the first time in many years. We also try to use, again, pre-COVID, but we're hoping to roll this out soon, very hands-on and very interactive methods of communication. So you'll see the sort of the Spark Hill banner at the bottom of that slide. This was a wide-scale neighbourhood festival that we held around local priorities. What were the gaps and barriers to providing a good service? What did we think a caring community looked like? And as you can see, we produced a very visual representation of that. And we also have a tool called Planning for Real as part of our portfolio, which again is a very interactive, very accessible. Everybody gets in a room and is able to communicate priorities, barriers, what they see as their hotspots and gotspots in a very sort of inclusive way. And we've used that tool where we've been doing regeneration activities, but also for service reviews. So again, we reviewed our repair service with customers using this methodology. And the paddock co-op is another element of the work that we do. So we work a lot with tenant management organisations and co-ops who have a very different sort of requirement in terms of communication. They effectively run the show. They manage homes on behalf of their fellow cooperators, and our communication with them has had to be, again, tailored to their needs and asks, really. Next slide, please. So I think this is the dreaded other C word, which is not communication, but COVID. So like everybody, I suspect we've had to change our methodologies during COVID. And in some senses, being able to interact with our more formal panels has been made a little bit easier by COVID. We handed out tablets to all our involved residents so that they could join us on virtual platforms. And in some aspects, that's enabled us to have more regular meetings. Because of our geography, it's not always been possible to get everybody in a room together or travelling to locations. So the virtual platform has helped us to a certain extent. We've also handed out mobile phones to other customers who are vulnerable or isolated during COVID to help them connect not only with us, but with families and friends and their local community. And again, some of the more innovative communication methodologies we've used with our support schemes is a support worker bear who's gone on the road and travelled around schemes with his own stories, and residents have been telling him their stories. Perhaps they would not have shared with staff. So we've been able to get some really good insight from our customers about what COVID and communication means to them, just by them literally talking to a bear, which sounds a little bit twee, but it's been really, really well received. And we've also got a photograph on there, I think, of a doorway bingo, which again, during COVID, we've had to do socially isolated events. But when we do these sorts of events, we try and not only ensure people have a good time, but we can ask them questions. And certainly we did some of the merger consultation questions using a doorstep bingo event. So people almost didn't know that they were giving us feedback. They were having a good time. And the picture of a shop is exactly what it is. It was about our customers actually taking communication with each other into their own hands. And we've seen some fantastic examples of our customers really facilitating communication with their own neighbours and within their own localities. And that was a shop in the very first lockdown where some tenants went out, bought food and produce and set up a community shop in one of the communal areas for people who were less able to go out, and again they've used that as that touch point to communicate with customers. At this point I'm going to hand over to Wellington, who is here in voice and in spirit, but I don't think visually. But the bottom left-hand photograph on your current slide shows a picture of Wellington, so you can know what he looks like. So Wellington, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I don't see the slide, so do you want me to read from my laptop?
Yes, just your document, Wellington.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. All right. Just to introduce myself, my background. My full name is Wellington Chiwara. I'm the chairperson of a code scrutiny panel. I succeeded Phil Glover, who left the panel at the end of last year, 2020. I worked under Phil as a deputy chairperson. We started working together in 2019, and then until last year. I've been a tenant of Accord. I've been a tenant of Accord since 2010, and I've worked briefly as a volunteer under the direction of Tina Dalton on a project called Time for Real for a year from 2013 to 2014. On leaving Time for Real, I was fortunate to get a paid job as an assistant quantity surveyor with Carillion Construction, where I worked until the company went into administration. In 2017, I applied for a place to study at Aston University for MBA program, and I graduated in 2019. Perhaps you may go to the next slide because I was reading onto I couldn't see clearly. Could you please go to the next slide? There's now a mismatch. Right. In 2017, let me just continue on from the laptop because I can't see clearly. In 2017, I applied for MBA degree program at Aston University and finally graduated in 2019. And on leaving university, I went into private business as self-employed, and I've been doing that ever since that time. Joining scrutiny panel. Since the formation of the Accord scrutiny panel in 2019, our meetings were held infrequently and could take 3 to 4 months before we hold another meeting. Thus, we did not cover much ground during the first year. Most of it was, we're doing training and learning the organization. When we attended the meetings, we usually spend time being inducted about the policies, systems, and procedures of Accord. We also did a brief training on use of social media, namely Facebook, Twitter, and learning about the chatbot, which was later introduced as part of the communication between residents and Accord. We had the opportunity to visit state-of-the-art new factory, which has a capacity to produce around 1,000 new homes every year. Actually, this is a Accord, flagship and a very, very interesting project. The chair and I were afforded the opportunity to visit the annual general meeting held at Black Country. This just shows you how Accord were very serious in trying to involve us, and which actually went a long way in boosting our, confidence, because we felt being, valued very much. Our role as a scrutiny panel is to act as a critical friend who provides constructive challenge to enable the voice of all residents to be heard. It is a tenant-owned and tenant-led. It helps to improve service. When did we start our work? It was at the end of 2019 that we finally agreed on the areas that our teams needed to scrutinize. These were service charges, repairs, and antisocial behavior. And when I just thought about service charges, I just thought it was just a small thing, but I realized that, we went at length so many months, discussing, scrutinizing about the charges. And then after we finished, we went on to do repairs, and we are yet to go on to do antisocial behavior. we were supposed to get attached to the various departments of Accord, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the plan was put on ice. Yes, this is where I thought we would have benefited a lot, knowing the organization and being able to interact with members of the Accord family. But unfortunately, because of COVID, this could not take place. Communication with the communication with the community engagement team. Accord immediately distributed iPads to all our members of the scrutiny panel. That is after the lockdown was imposed. That was a means of trying to communicate so that we carry on with the work and start virtual meetings. We started virtual meetings in March 2020, soon after an announcement of. Sorry for there was an interruption on my phone. We kept. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, that's fine. Rosemary,
You could hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Yes, hear you, Wellington.
Oh, sorry. Yes, there was an interruption. Accord communication with community engagement team. Accord immediately distributed iPads to all members of the scrutiny panel so that we could start virtual meetings in March 2020, soon after the announcement of the lockdown. We kept in touch with the engagement team through mobile phones and these tablets, and we communicated through emails as well. We never felt like we were physically apart. The community engagement team has done an excellent job of providing secretarial services and raising awareness of the organization's general policies and procedures. They constantly kept us in loop on any issues we were not sure of, and minutes of the meetings are always done and distributed timeously. The community engagement team planned for us to meet the staff, including senior managers. These are for managers for Accord. And it's also another way we felt we were being taken very seriously. Since then, we have been doing our business remotely, and attendance has been good throughout the period of the pandemic till today. Work done so far. There's been fairly good ground covered since the start of the COVID-19 because we managed to hold more virtual meetings. We have looked into the role of the service charges, which had proved to be a contentious issue, and we made suggestions. We managed to look into the war repair policy and made quite a lot of suggestions, particularly concerning repair categories, priorities, and timescales. Also on that, I want to add something that I feel the Accord managed to take us seriously. It is about improvement on our properties. Previously, we could not. The Accord wanted the residents to do just minor, improvements, but now since we ask it to, for us to be involved even when it comes to serious improvements, they accepted at last, and it's going to be in the policy, in the final policy, which is still in the draft form. The panel felt quite valued, as most of our suggestions were taken on board, although they will still remain in a draft form. We are also working to improve the service and feedback offered by customer first when customers report repairs. Merger with Green Square. Accord consulted us and heard our views concerning the proposed merger with Green Square and about what the new look might be like, in terms of branding. We were also invited to take part in the focus group, which I also attended. It was quite worthwhile, an eye-opener. Communication with the engagement team. On behalf of the scrutiny panel, I would like to commend the work done by the community engagement team in trying to empower the residents by ensuring that the decisions taken by a court, including the policies and procedures, represent their views. The communication between engagement team and the scrutiny panel has been excellent, and everything has been communicated well to us. Thank you very much and goodbye. Are there any questions?
Wellington, I was just going to cover the communication and complaints just very quickly in a couple of minutes. And this is chaired by Carol, who I believe might be on this call. And interestingly, I think the complaints panel took the view to call itself the complaints and communication panel prior to together with tenants' commitments. And I think this was probably because, like most landlords, communication is a key factor in whether we get complaints resolved quickly or whether we don't, and is often a factor in why people complain to us in the first place, that they don't feel we've either communicated why we've done something or why we haven't done something, or even communicated at all. But interestingly, I think the communication element of the panel's work has largely been its focus, because whilst we have had some complaints forwarded to the panel as a designated person from our customers, I don't think they've had a particularly heavy workload in looking at complaints, but their work on communication has been very highly valued. So I think that's probably it from us. Sorry, we potentially have overrun a little bit.
Hi both, thank you for that. That's really, really interesting. Yes, we have overrun ever so slightly. So I don't think we've got, unless there's any absolutely burning questions, I think there's sort of one around, Wellington talked about sort of the service charge issue. I think it'd be good to know, off the back of the communication with tenants, what sort of improvements were recommended in that area. Was anything sort of taken on board that the tenants sort of suggested that they had concerns about? But I think that's probably the only question we have time for, unfortunately.
Okay.
That up, or do you want me to?
Oh yes, please. You can answer.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I think there are a number of areas coming out of service charges. So again, communication. So if we are, setting service charges, we need to really communicate and involve customers in deciding what those service levels might be. For an example, one particular scheme decided that they didn't want to pay their gardening service charge, and we're now talking to them about them managing the gardening themselves. So again, it's about local groups being empowered to take on services should they wish. Again, it's about how we set out detail of service charges and really enable people to understand whether they are getting value for money, whether they can scrutinise quotes that we've got in terms of that service charges, but also to involve them very early on in the process and make it clear what they're paying for and what they can expect in the case of service standards. So if it is window cleaning, how often will the window cleaners come? Who signs it off? So it's some really practical ways that customers can really get under the skin of service charges, so it doesn't just appear as a charge that we expect them to pay for without them understanding what it means to them and what level of service they can expect from it.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Wellington. It was a shame you kind of join us through your video, but your message was heard loud and clear. And just again, just to remind people, some great points there from both of you around the Accord experience, digital by choice, retaining that inclusion despite difficult circumstances, and really the importance of those informal communications and touch points from people right across your communities and right across your companies. So some really terrific takeaways for people there. So thank you again, Sarah, Wellington. Thank you, Rachel and Mark, and to the NHF team that have supported this event, and over 130 people that have joined us today. It's been really super. Just to remind you, there are another 2 bite-sized events planned, covering the other elements of the Together with Tenants Charter, 26th of February and the 5th of March. So we do hope that you'll take time to join and participate in those events too. Thanks very much, and stay safe.